Hello again out there in listener land. Dr. G, Dr. Jardina here with another Therapy Without the Couch. And today we're going to do a special themed episode, something I think a lot of people are interested in. I've done some talks on this recently in person. And so now, for those of you who aren't here in Miami or who can't attend those talks or missed it, we're going to talk about the psychology of dating. A little bit about relationships too, but mostly about that finding your person and why we get stuck in loops or why it's hard to find your person or, you know, the whole thing. Um, the typical disclaimer here, everything I'm given here is guidance and tips, but it is not therapy, despite the clever name, Therapy Without the Couch. This is not therapy, but if you would like to discuss these things and get guidance tailored to you, please reach out to me for telehealth or in Coral Gables. Okay, so the psychology of dating, and dating is all about finding your match, finding your person. So, what are we looking for? Where, like, what's even the quest to begin with? And really, it begins with this duality, if you want to say that, this balancing act of logic versus lust, ego versus emotion. This is the struggle here of trying to figure out how to get all of our needs met. And it's about attraction, right? Like, why would I pick this one person? Why am I drawn to them? So let's talk about what attracts you. And it touches on all these things. We can have the logical, uh, smart fit kind of value match. This makes sense. You've heard people say that we just make sense together, kind of the on paper type of connection or attraction. But then there can also be the more emotional one that comes from social or cultural pressure to marry a certain type of person from similar background, or your aunt or your grandma set you up with this person, so they're kind of really shipping you together. So there's an emotional piece that may not make sense logically. There's of course lust, which is what most people are familiar with when you think about dating or meeting your person, just straight up physical desire and attraction, which is great if you're just looking for a hookup, but maybe not reliable for finding your forever person. But it's a factor, which we will talk about. Of course, tied to lust is alcohol, which is just the sort of inhibitions are down, and we're shopping on grocery shopping on an empty stomach. There's inhibitions are gone, so kind of may be attracted to lots of people or perhaps the wrong people. There's another biological component here, but I'm going to call it emotional, which is the hormones. Um, More so for women, but men too. That depending on where you're at in your cycle, depending on where you're at in your age, there could be a hormonal component that affects attraction. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this study, but they took objectively rated attractive men and had them wear T-shirts, and then they sealed those T-shirts in Ziploc baggies, and then they had women who've never seen or met the men smell the T-shirts. Sounds gross, but pheromones. And women could sort of smell who was hotter, but when they were in their more fertile phase of the menstrual cycle, they were really tuned into that. So some of this stuff is to a little degree biologic and sort of out of our mental consciousness. There's also an ego component that I've seen a lot of folks struggle with dating, in that there's a desire to win, to get the person. I deserve this person. I'm a 10, so why shouldn't I have a 10? Sometimes it's also the undesirable, the unavailable, but I want to win. I want to get the married man, or I want to the unavailable woman. I'm gonna break her down. I mean, to the point that I've even heard the occasional crazy claim of like, she said she's a lesbian, but I'm gonna turn her, which is wild. But there's ego in that, right? I'm special. I'm the most special. I can make this transaction happen. And I don't know if that's really about attraction, but there's a factor there that affects people's mate choices. Of course, there's the emotional part of I like your personality, which I think is a very important part, but it's not always highlighted, especially in some of those first meetings. But you're going to be spending time with this person, hypothetically. So, and speaking of time spent, to some degree, there's an unconscious, maybe more emotional um, element of the more you spend time with somebody, the more attractive they become to you because there's a familiarity. Um, there's a proximity. This is where once upon a time a lot of mate matching happened because we were in the same village, or we work in the same company, or we go to the same religious service. I mean, pre internet dating and pre, everybody traveling all over for schooling and stuff, that's what it was. You married somebody who lived 3 doors down from you because that's who you see all the time. Who the heck else are you going to pick? But that's a factor in this. Now, there's another logical piece that I do think comes in and is worth considering, and that's shared interests, which is kind of tied to shared values. But it's, if we're both at CrossFit, we're more likely to meet. But if one of you is at CrossFit and the other one's at the dog park, well, maybe we're in different circles. So you're more likely to connect with people who have similar interests, but you're also more likely to meet them. It's one of the dating tips that we will touch on later. But do the things you want to be doing, do the things you want your partner to be doing, and hopefully your partner, your future partners, they are doing those same things. This, I don't know if falls under logic or ego, but there's an element of timing and resources. Some women want to find a mate in a hurry before I run out my fertile years. Some men want to find a mate in a hurry before I lose my hair or before I lose my title. There's sometimes a feeling of like an expiration date that can leave folks with this like, this is who I was dancing with when the lights came on, and maybe they're not the best person, but it's what I got. It's what's available, and like I'm now going to turn into a pumpkin. And I don't like that pressure, but sometimes that's realistic. We'll touch on that later too, that sometimes you're picking the best for now. You're not holding out for perfect, because then what if you time out and you run out of time and perfect never comes along? So as I list all these things as potential factors in finding your mate and your match, the juggling act becomes, the psychology part is, what matters most to you. I can tell you what I think you should be looking for, but what matters most to you? And everybody has their different set point. But then also, how do you modulate and moderate between all these and kind of find the middle? Because you want a little from column A, a little from column B, a little from column C. Ideally, we want some logic and some lust. We want some emotions and some pragmatics. So here's how I help folks break this down. I've come up with this categorical rating system for your future mate that I call your relationship wish list, or your ideal partner wish list. And the thought behind this project is because, just like the danger of going to the grocery store when you're hungry and all you buy is chocolate and bread and not what you went in for, if you go shopping for a partner without any kind of plan or strategy, then some of the logical, practical stuff might get lost in the sauce. Some of the value stuff might, and then we're just going based on emotions and lust. And that's, again, one factor, but it shouldn't be the only dominating factor. The other way to think about this is it helps you focus in. If you're shopping for a little black dress for an upcoming event, and you know what your size is and you know what your budget is, well, you need to factor some of those things in. If you walk into the department store and you see a long red dress that's out of your budget, don't waste your time looking at that. It's out of your budget. It's red. It's long. We're shopping for something in your budget that's little and black. So we can narrow down. We cannot waste time. We cannot get distracted by the shiny thing. And that's the thought behind this list. So step number one, or category number one for your ideal partner list in trying to find a mate, should be your deal breakers. These are the red flags. These are the hard yes or no. This should be pretty easy and categorical and sort of binary, black and white. Somebody's either married or they're not. Somebody's either a felon or they're not. Somebody's either lives in the US or they don't. So some of these things you can not traditionally, but in current times, you could get some of this stuff out of the way in the first interaction on a Bumble through chat before we even meet. Now, people may be lying. We're not going to even touch that. But hypothetically, this is sort of the interview question. If you're going for a job, I need to know if you have the necessary degree or if you live in this necessary proximity before we even get to the interview. So, but this is the stuff that we don't bend on. This is one of the reasons I make this list, because I've had too many patients come to me and they're like, Okay, he's married, but they've been separated for a while and they're sleeping in separate rooms. Or yes, she lives in California and I'm in Florida, but she said she's going to be moving here soon. So people start trying to make these deals with themselves. And I'm not saying we're going to get to the compromises in a minute, but some your deal breakers, it's nothing to bend on. It's a yes or no. It's a red flag. It's either in or out. The example I give folks here, because people try to use green flags to wash away red flags. I actually have a little game in my office here called the Red Flags game. It's a drinking game, but I bought it for demonstration purposes. Imagine if I described to you this partner. He's tall, dark, handsome, wealthy, cultured, likes some of the movies you like, likes going to concerts, married, fit, enjoys fine dining, likes to go hang out with your friends. Oh, did you hear that? I said he's married. So the rest of those green flags, the rest of those positives, they don't matter because this is a red flag. This is a deal breaker. So the rest of that's washed away. Sorry. And that's an inconvenient truth, but that's why we have to have this kind of locked in. Otherwise, when you get the rose colored glasses on or you start catching feelings, then you start trying to rub that red flag and kind of make it pink. No. So we lock this in. Now, category number 2, this is the meat and potatoes. This is when most people are talking about who they're looking for, they're not listing what I don't want, which is more what the red flags are. Though some of it's what you do want. You want somebody who's definitely Jewish or definitely Catholic or definitely wants kids. So it can be some of those for the red flags, deal breakers. But the second category is all the descriptors really of their person. And this is what I call my bending points. You need to know your ideal scenario, but you could bend a little. And it goes something like this, like, ideally, I would have somebody who is just as religious as I am in the same religion, in the same faith. I could bend if they're not as hardcore as me, but they are of the same faith. And it might be a deal breaker if they're not of the same faith and they sort of mock my beliefs. So this is where we bend. Ideally, my partner would be taller than me. I could bend if he's the same height as me when I'm wearing heels, but it might be a deal breaker if he's shorter than me, even without heels. So you see, there can be this kind of like meter where you can picture a tree, like a palm tree, bend, but if it bends too far, it breaks. And the idea here is that we need to know what we're looking for in kind of describing every aspect of the person. But you're not going to get all of these. And that's just realistic. Like, there is no unicorn. You always have to compromise. But if you find you're bending on too many of your bending points, and you're not getting many of them, well, now we have to consider it a breaking point. So this person meets all my deal breakers, check, check. But then on part 2, on level 2, if they're missing 1 or 2 of these, if I have to bend a little, that's life. But if they only have 1 or 2 of these and I'm bending on 10 of them, why are we trying to force this, guys? So that's the idea behind the bending points. And then finally is the fantasy list. This is usually what attracts us at first. This can be lust or desire. This is all that like rom-com stuff. This is what seals the deal. And I've added this category over the years because I've had some non-committal folks who are just scared of jumping into something fully. But if all your level 1 or level 2 are met, what are you holding off on? So if there's level 1 plus most of the level 2, and then you've got 1 level 3 fantasy list on there too, man, come on, jump in. Now this is just your trauma history holding you back. This is just you having your heart broken before and you're scared it's going to happen again. But you're basically bringing like your person into the fold. So what are you chickening out about? Now, what we want to do here with the list is it's a balance between match and chemistry. So the goal is both. I don't want you to just pick somebody who you have vibes with because that's not enough. That's not sustainable. But I also don't just want a shopping list, a checklist. I've had people who do this exercise, but they'll say there's just something missing. Like on paper, he's the one. Based on my list, she checks most of the boxes, but I'm just not feeling it. So maybe that needs to be one of your deal breakers. If there's not a feeling of warmth, connection, chemistry, attraction, kind of overall, then what's the point? If it quote unquote makes sense, but you're not feeling it. Now, that might be some of your trauma history, attachment issues, and we'll talk about that next section. But still, we want to balance between match and chemistry. And what we want to be able to do is kind of like stick to your values, stick to your list, but allow the human element to influence. There is some degree of warming up to somebody. There is some degree of, at first I thought this was so important, but now it's less so. But I don't want you to compromise your original beliefs prior to meeting the person. Again, the rose-colored glasses. Before I said I would never marry or date somebody who has blah, blah, blah. But now that I'm catching feelings, I'm like, eh. And that's you're making a deal with yourself that you might regret. You might resent the person later. You might feel like, I can't believe I gave up so easily my boundaries. So Dr. Giardina's goal for you in dating and marrying well is these three things. This is what I think we're looking for, or what is required for a long-term partner. Somebody who you sleep with and tell secrets to and do life with. Essentially, lust plus emotion and respect plus logic and values and lifestyle. Because if you only have 2 out of 3, I don't think it's enough to last. I think you need to have some kind of sexual component, some kind of intimacy that makes this more than just a roommate thing or friends. There needs to be a feeling of trust and openness and emotional connection, emotional intimacy. I want to tell you my secrets. I want to get your feedback. I respect your opinion. But our lifestyles need a match. If you wake up early and I go to bed late, if you're Catholic and I'm Jewish, if you live in New York and I live in Florida, if you travel for work and I'm a homebody, like at some point, there's got to be a fit. The yin and yang kind of complementary balance works for some things, but for like lifestyle, you want some more overlap there. Okay. So now let's get more into like the psychological unconscious stuff of why do we pick who we do? Everybody's talked about attachment styles by now. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you've heard a podcast on attachment styles. It might even been one I did. Attachment styles don't have to be this doesn't have to be the thing that forever defines you and your relationships, but you can't ignore that it's a factor. So you need to know your set point, your baseline. Are you secure, avoidant, or anxious in your attachment? So secure means you assume it will all be fine and that we're cool and what we say is what we mean. Avoidant is that I think that my partner is going to smother me or I'm going to lose myself, and so I need to fight for my independence and my space. And anxiously attached is that I feel like you're going to run away from me. I have abandonment fears. I feel like I need to double check everything you say. Where this is important is so often the folks that land on my couch for couples therapy, one is anxious and one is avoidant. So there's this push-pull back and forth tug of war where they're each triggering the other one's kind of core fear. That doesn't mean that pairing can't work, but it gets a little toxic because the more the anxious chases the avoidant, the more avoidant runs away. And the more the avoidant runs away, the more anxious gets triggered that you're running away from me and abandoning me and because I'm not enough. And round and round we go. So do you ask somebody's attachment style and based on that immediately run away? Say we're not a fit? No, but we need to know this and we need to kind of, we need to take it into account. It's a factor. Now, attachment style can often originate in your family of origin upbringing, the way your parents were with you, the way they were with each other. But it's also a question of, is it your set point? Like, is your fate predetermined? Is this in my bloodline? That I'm going to end up like my parents. If they divorced, I'll divorce. If they fought, I'm going to fight with my spouse. If one of them cheated, then I'm going to be a cheater. And so the narrative can be dangerous, whether you're talking about star signs, attachment styles, family history of divorce or not. Some people, you can't ignore it, but listen, it can't be an excuse. You don't need to take it as a passive victim role. You can challenge that narrative. You can challenge that preset, predetermined future. It doesn't necessarily have to go that way, but you maybe have a proclivity. You maybe have a leaning, so be aware of that, but you can resist that. And that's partly what therapy is about, self-awareness and challenging your beliefs about yourself and relationships. Now, the other important factor in why we choose who we do really is what we saw modeled. But this can swing either way. Your mommy or daddy issues can push you towards somebody like mommy or daddy or towards somebody very different from mommy or daddy. So watch how this goes. Um, if you're female, do you seek a man who is strong and decisive because that's how your father was and you felt like that made you or your mother feel safe or like there was a good leader in the house or he was in charge? Or because your father was strong and decisive, you want somebody as a passive partner because you saw dad as kind of overwhelming you and mom. And it felt like you didn't have a voice. And now, with your partner that you've chosen, you want to have more of a voice than you felt like your mother had. So, you see, what that parental role offers can be a push away or a pull toward. It is definitely a factor, though. So, you can't ignore what you saw growing up and what you experienced in those gender roles and that relationship stuff. It matters, but it may not go the way you think. Um, we also need to explore your relationship history as a reason for why you're seeking out or drawn to a certain type of partner. Um, because we can get into these cycles and patterns and scripts. Um, do you assume you'll always be cheated on? Do you assume that guys or girls always smother their partner or always run away? If you get into this sort of binary stereotypic thinking based on a past relationship, then now you can start to pull that out of your current partner in what's called projection, where if you behave around your partner like they're going to cheat on you, well, they might show certain signs that almost line up with that. Now, you're not pushing them into cheating, so I'm not saying that, but the person who's worried that you're pulling away, that partner might feel that worry and that anxiety and that need for answers, and that might make them feel overwhelmed, so then they shut down and tell you less as a reaction to you. But now you see them telling you less and you're like, they're pulling away. See, we might be creating the thing we fear. It can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, some of these patterns and cycles and narratives. um, Again, therapy, self-awareness, self-reflection, journaling, um, looking at your patterns, and are you the common denominator, either because you're creating that pattern to some degree or because you're selecting partners that are more prone to that. And that can be a factor here too, that sometimes people find somebody just like mommy or daddy or just like my ex unconsciously because that didn't end well, and I'm going to keep repeating, almost in some kind of like Buddhist multiple lives thing. I'm going to keep doing it again until I win, until I get them to love me, until I but yo, maybe you're just setting yourself up for another repeat of that pattern. So maybe going against type is the move instead of going again and again and again and again and like not taking the hint. Okay. But that's where ego can come in, and unconscious drive to be loved and prove that I can change them. They would change if they loved me enough. Dangerous, slippery, toxic slope there, gang. Um, Not big T trauma like abuse and assault, but small T trauma like being cheated on or feeling like somebody uh, betrayed you, which are traumas, but again, we separate the two. Um, that can have us looking for cues and clues and triggers and warning signs. But sometimes we're not very good at playing detective. So, yeah, if your guy's coming home late and he keeps quote unquote having to work late and he smells like perfume and he has lipstick on his collar and there was condom wrappers in his car, okay, yeah, you probably caught on to some bad news. But just because he said I had to work late doesn't mean immediately he's sleeping with his secretary. Maybe he had to work late. So maybe that is a possible indicator, but how often does it happen? What is the context? What else is going on around that? Um, if your female partner has a premenstrual moment where she gets upset, then are you going to say, well, that's it? See, all women are crazy. My ex got really hormonal and emotional and she was always fighting with me. And maybe she's just having a bad day on a bad part of the month. Maybe this is a one off. Maybe it's something to watch. But So we shouldn't ignore these little cues and triggers because you don't want to step in the same hole twice. But some people sort of overreact. They take that one hint of something and they make a whole story out of it, because that's not always an indicator of that one specific outcome. That can be a symptom or a behavior tied to so many other things. Um, so just be conscious of that when we're looking for those things, that you want to break the pattern of bad relationships. But if you jump too fast, if you cut somebody off too quick, again, some things you don't need to give 3 strikes. Some things are so egregious, it's 1 strike and you're out. But maybe we need to give the person a chance to explain their side of the story. Maybe you're putting a narrative on there that fits your fears, but that may not be true. Just like if we talk about big T trauma, not every time that you drive in a car are you going to get in a car accident at that intersection. That one time you did. So now you're extra cautious, maybe at all intersections. But how many times have you driven through intersections without getting T-boned? So maybe you look both ways extra at intersections, but you know it doesn't always turn out that way. So we have to challenge that belief that we can sort of predict the future, especially with human behavior. Another factor in why we pick who we do as partners is, to some degree, your personality set point. Like and you can argue nature or nurture here, and really it kind of doesn't matter because you are who you are. It doesn't matter how you got there. We're not trying to blame somebody, and you can't change the past. But some people are more cuddly. Some people are more quiet. Some people like more alone time. Some people are more interested in being around crowds. These are just kind of who you are. So you're going to want to find somebody that sort of aligns with that allows you that alone time, or that also wants to go out to social functions with crowds. Again, this is sort of back to that previous statement about like lifestyle alignment and not trying to change somebody. So lastly, we need to be conscious with taking all this in of the unconscious, why we do what we do. Are you using assumptions and projections and stereotypes as a way to weed people out? But perhaps that, while it's a shortcut, is not entirely blanketly fair. Stereotypes hold true sometimes, but not always. There's an exception to all rules. So you got to decide if I'm being overly cautious and protective or too liberal and too open. What makes you more comfortable? But either one can hurt your dating prospects. If you think all Miami guys, quote unquote, are like this, or all girls who go to yoga are like this, or if you form these broad statements about people, while they can be a somewhat of a shorthand, it doesn't always apply equally. And back to the idea of projections, are you talking to them and behaving around them in a way that now draws out that narrative that fulfills your prophecy, but that may not be who they are. You might be kind of pulling for that, kind of creating that. I wish this was interactive. I'd love for you guys to ask some questions right now. Put some questions on, if I'm posting this on social media or on the podcast sites, throw some questions. Email me a question about this. I would love to answer it and put it as maybe a follow-up. Or you can just come talk to me. Okay, super big important factor here. Dun, 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 dun. Are you looking for who you want or who you need? Now that might seem like I'm playing a tongue twister or a trick, but this is about logic and being self-aware versus getting lost in either lust or fantasy of who you wish you were. So I know this couple that they've been together a long time, very happy, 2 kids. But one of the first times my wife and I got to see them interact on like a very early dating moment, we were at karaoke and she was up on stage gyrating to, it was either I Touch Myself by the Divinals or Like a Virgin by Madonna. But one of these, she was very provocatively, raunchily, rowdily singing and getting into it. And she was having a great time. And my wife and I were looking at the guy she was dating and thinking, oh my God, this is when he's going to bolt. Like, he's going to see this and be like, what is this girl up to? She's too much for me. And he was looking puppy dog eyed, like she was the sweetest little angel. And that was a great indication of like, you love this person for who they are. And he was who she needed, because not only did he love her for who she is, but he's also over the years kind of helped her balance a little bit more with, he's a little bit more logical and grounded, and she's a little bit more emotional and freewheeling. And so that was what she needed. What she always said she wanted was some brooding guy in the corner who wore a dark trench coat and listened to Phantom of the Opera while writing poetry. And while that sounds great, like, then if he's brooding and you're singing karaoke, like, who's gonna remember to feed the kids? You need what you need, not always what you want. Um, I think it's important to know you. I think it's important to know that my wife is always giving me what I need by calling me out on things, which sometimes I don't like and I don't want, but I need that call out. I need somebody to slap my hand or wake me up to reality. She pushes me to do things that make me feel scared or that I'm maybe nervous to do, but I need that. And without it, I might be less driven. So, but maybe I want a yes woman who would just say, "You're great, honey," and kiss me on the forehead. And I think I want that. And maybe for a week I would like that. But long term, that's not what I need. So, are you a person that needs stability or excitement? You better know, because if you like stability, if you need stability, and your partner is a wild child, then while that might be an exciting weekend in Cabo, that's not going to be a long term sustainable marriage. Maybe the other way to think about it is, do you want excitement but need stability? And that's where it's self awareness in picking the right type of match. Do you prefer someone who lets you live your life independent, but you need someone who gives you structure and calls you out? Like I said, my wife, I think I want her to leave me alone to my own devices, and I do want that. But that's not good for me. Some of this is almost like, I want to eat chocolate cake for breakfast, but I need to eat eggs and toast. You see? Do you wish you could have sex on the beach, but in reality, you need to be in a private room with the door locked and the lights off? Are you attracted to bad boys, but you really need somebody like Albert Brenneman who will dote on you? Albert Brenneman is my ideal mate for all women. If y'all saw that movie Hitch, he's the, can't think of the name of the actor, but he's kind of goofy. He does the pizza dance and the Q-tip dance. He's a little bit overweight. He's not the stunning, tall, fit, ripped guy. He's a little bit clumsy, but he's sweet and he's loyal and he's kind and he's got a good heart and he's not just trying to bed you down and run away. And Albert Brenneman may not be the most appealing at first glance. Is not who you want, but he's who you need because he's going to make you feel loved and secure. Are you catfishing your partner or yourself by pretending that, oh yeah, this is me? But like, shouldn't you be like owning your whole self and be like, that's not me. Like, I wish I was that guy or gal. Sorry. This would be so cool if it worked out. Now, this is an important one that's come up with some of my couples. Do you need to be the bigger dog or the alpha? Or do you prefer to have somebody else be the leader and you can take a back seat? That's an important thing to know about yourself. Ego and power struggles so often happen. The one I see is that men, at least Miami men, say they don't want a gold digger. They want a woman who's got a career or her own money or who's not just into me for what I have. And then they get serious with this woman and she has a career and her own money. And now he feels insecure because she doesn't need his money. Or he feels intimidated because her career might be as big or bigger than his. And so people want to have business lunches with her and sort of treat him like the arm candy. So you got to sort of know yourself. What do you really need? Not what do you want, not what do you think you want. And tied to that example can be ego and the feeling of like, I don't want to be treated as less than. The joke that I so often see is the extremely attractive woman with the pretty normal looking guy, and all of his buddies or all even her buddies will joke, Man, how did you land her? Did you trick her? Oh man, what a trick. You really pulled one over. And while that's a kind of backhanded compliment of you're an extremely attractive woman and you're a lucky man to have her, that teasing can make you feel like, do I suck? Like, am I out of my depth? It can make both parties feel so uncomfortable. So, do you need somebody who's more of a even match, whether it's in terms of attractiveness, finances, career, whatever? Um, I gave the example of the man who's intimidated by his woman's career, but I've seen the reverse. Women saying they want somebody who's tall and rich and famous, the athlete, the Heat player, but then they get jealous about his travel schedule or the groupies or the and so you think you want the NFL player because what a catch, but can you handle that lifestyle? The limelight that he's in, the things people comment on his social media? Even my job, I talk to attractive women about their love life all day long. And sometimes if I give a hug, if somebody's crying, I come home smelling like the perfume. My wife is not a jealous person, but a lot of women would not be keen on me having this job. So while you think it's cool to be married to a therapist or a psychologist, um, you got to be, can you handle it? Like, do you want that? But maybe it's not what you need. Maybe that would make you feel too weird. Okay. Now, we talked about their red flags that we're trying to rule out. What are your red flags? What do you need to own or adjust? This is also a factor in the psychology of why maybe you've had trouble finding your person, because you might have deal breakers that could be a blind spot or that you maybe consistently you've gotten feedback on and you haven't addressed. Maybe you need to even consider making compromises because, well, I'm great in X, Y, and Z, but in A or B, I have this thing that some people might find not so great. For myself, I think I bring a lot to the table. Were I a single gentleman dating, but I am 5'3" in Miami. I don't know if it's everywhere, but in Miami, that is a deal breaker for almost every woman. So while I have a lot of green flags, I have to factor in that my overall rating, if you want to rate yourself not just an appearance, you're a 6 or a 10, it goes down a notch or two because of my height, and I'm aware of that, my valuation. So, what red flag might you have? And if I can't change my height, but can you change? Can you go to therapy? Can you be more self aware? Can you? I mean, my wife is also 5'3", so that helped, right? I had to. We met very young, but like I wasn't looking for women who were 5'9". So it kind of is a self selection filter. Even if we were clicking, if she's 5'9" and I'm 5'3", like I kind of know that's not going to work anyway. So knowing whatever your red flag is, if you're a person who needs a lot of space and independence, you got to know that. And then maybe not everybody's going to dig that. And so you're going to find somebody who also needs a lot of space and independence because you can't give more. So, and then this is also where I want to teach the step into the punch tactic. I think I've talked about this on some other recordings, but in boxing, we teach this technique that only makes sense in the boxing ring and in romantic relationships. Um, if you're boxing and you're squared up and your opponent is right there, if they swing that punch with a full body torque, they can knock you out. That's the knockout punch. So what we tell the boxer to do is they should step closer to their opponent, lean into the punch. And now it takes the power out of the punch because this full extension can't happen. Now I'm only going to hit you with my elbow a little bent. And so it's not as strong a hit. And I use this metaphor to say that if you have something you're self conscious of, that you've been told is a red flag, that has come up in past relationships, that's the type of thing you want to get out of the way right away. I'm not dating, thank goodness, but I joke about my height really early on. Before I had a beard, I had a really baby face. I would comment on that very early on with new patients, with people, because I know it. And I don't want you to bring it up, and I don't want you to think I'm not self aware. And let's just throw that out there. Um, I use foul language a lot in my sessions. I comment on that in some of my first meetings with anybody, patients or networking or friends. Like, I know it, and I'm probably not going to change it. So I'm aware. And if you don't like it, cool, no hard feelings. But like, I know this is the show. So stepping into the punch and owning it and kind of falling on your sword is a way to show self-awareness, but then also to start a dialogue about something for you to suss out, is that person seeing this as a red flag, or they're like, okay, like, so long as you're working on it, or so long as you're aware, so long as, but sometimes it's nothing to work on. And so, like, buyer beware. Like, I get this could be a deal breaker, so I get it. And it also, it stings less because you're almost taking yourself out of the equation. You're accepting that you might be weeded out. But then why else? I mean, are there patterns that you need to be aware of? Are you too picky? Are you the type of person that's sleeping around and dating 6 people at a time, so you're never really taking it seriously? Are you too clingy and needy? Are you too fixated on your appearance or your health and fitness and your macros? Are you depressed or just generally a negative and pessimistic person, and it's hard for you to be cheery? Some of these are factors that, with self-awareness, you can either self-select somebody who matches to your style, or you can go to therapy and maybe work on this. Now, caution to something I said a minute ago. I talked about dating down, is the way we say it, because of my height. I have another patient who she checks a lot of boxes, but she's bipolar. And so she feels like, knowing that, that's not an easy thing for a partner to deal with. So maybe I need to lower my standard. This is a balancing act between self-awareness versus not pursuing real happiness. If you're dating down with self-awareness to find somebody where I have baggage and you have baggage and it's all good, okay, that's smart. But if you're not really into this person, if you're compromising too many of your red flags because you're like, I have a red flag too, now that sort of sets up resentment and sort of like it's too much settling. So be aware. Maybe you're a 10 in so many things, but you have a red flag that brings you down to an 8. Okay, know that. But you don't need to date a 4. Like, you don't need to sort of shrug your shoulders and be like, what else can I get? We do want to see the overall person, the overall balance. You have plenty green flags. You have plenty strengths. So don't let that one red or pink flag make you feel like love is hopeless, or I have to just take anybody who says hi to me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying self-awareness. I'm saying step into the punch. I'm saying know that that's a factor. Okay. Now, this got some press recently, so I do want to touch on, and I did a podcast briefly on this, but the idea of the ick. Is it the ick, or is it red flags, or is it you? So you got to be aware of your past triggers and your defense mechanisms, like saying things like, you're just like my father. Is that a cautionary thing, like we said earlier, about looking for, or is it just the ick right away? Well, he scratched his head the same way my father does. That's it. I'm out. And it's like this snap judgment. There can be this quick, like, oh, nope, bad. And so we want to be self-aware there. Like, you can have preferences for certain traits, or look for the cues and the warning signs, like we were saying. Like, maybe you want somebody who opens the door for you. Maybe you don't like somebody who drinks too much or bites their nails. But like I said previously, I think patterns and context matter here. So I didn't hold the door for you, not because I'm not being chivalrous, but because you were like too far away and I thought it'd be weird and you have to run, or I had something in my hands too, or I'm biting my nails because I got something underneath them. It's not because I'm an unhygienic person. I was having a drink because you were having a drink. I was paralleling you. So we should look for these things as either red flags or green flags, but you want to know, like, what else is going on in the context. Otherwise, you jump right to unconscious ick. Because some people are just afraid of opening up or being vulnerable or catching feelings. So they want the ick. They want a quick rule out. They want to be like, nope, she's a Libra. That's it. I'm out. No, he didn't button the top button on his shirt. I'm out. Yo, that's like too snap a judgment. That's too small. That's just you trying to find a reason to bolt because maybe you're not ready to date. Okay. Are you protecting your heart or your ego? Is this self-protective or self-destructive? Are you trying not to fall back into negative toxic cycles, or are you just setting yourself up for self-fulfilling prophecy of like, I'm never going to find anybody, is your defense mechanism to protect you going too far? And some cases, it might not be the ick that needs to be a total rule out. Maybe it's just a pink flag to monitor. Or maybe you're just not vibing. And it's okay to just say that. You don't need to pick up a trumped up reason because she twirled her hair. You can just say, I didn't like her. And I think some people have gotten like hesitant to just say, we're not a match, or this was nice, but sorry, it doesn't. You can just say that. You don't need to explain it. I think if you've been dating for a long while, you owe somebody a breakup explanation so that way they can change for the future, or that way it's like a polite exit interview. But if we're on a third date, I'd rather you don't ghost, but you don't need to give a whole reason. You can just say, sorry, I just don't think it's clicking. But I think some people try to find the ick as a explanation for themselves more than the other person. Now, can vibes and time outweigh the ick? Can or should you get past the ick? Like, is it a deal breaker or more like a pet peeve? What else fits the bill? Like, what are the green flags that they have? And I think a big question here is, how deep in it are you already? If you're on a first date and the guy farts, that could maybe just be an easy, dude, social awareness, man, hygiene, politeness, nah, we're out. But if we've been dating for 3 months and the guy farts, maybe that's not your favorite thing, but like, there's already so many other good things. Maybe this is something we can overlook so long as it's not a pattern, right? The standard, the threshold, I would argue, changes once you've got more investment. Now, obviously, cheating is cheating. So whether you give your number to the waitress or the waiter on the first date or the first year anniversary, it's still all bad, right? But once we've got more time sunk in, more investment, I think we should be a little bit more cautious about using a small red, pink flag, ick kind of thing as a reason to rule out the whole thing. Because clearly there's other good stuff. That's why you've been here. And to some degree, we need to consider like the rose-colored glasses effect. And what once might be annoying or irritating or an ick can be charming once I catch feelings for you. We have a colleague here in the office that when she laughs, she snorts. And we all think it's adorable, and we try to get her to laugh and snort. But if she was my neighbor and in an apartment complex and she cooked smelly food and she was rude to my kid and my dog, if I heard her snort, I'd probably be like, ugh, it's the worst. Because I already see you through not rose-colored glasses, whatever the opposite of that is. So that same behavior, that same trait, that thing that might have given you the ick if you didn't know or didn't like the person, can be kind of a cute thingy between you two. So consider that too. That feelings might be fueling your ick. Time in. All this to say, therapy matters. Self-awareness matters. I'm not saying you got to come see me, but you may not be ready for a real relationship if you're nitpicking and you're trying to find excuses to be like, this isn't the one, this isn't the one. Maybe if they're all not the one, then maybe the common factor is you. And take a look in the mirror. Take a look in some therapy. I have written a book manuscript about a year or two ago, and I've been shopping it around, and I'm frustrated at how hard this process is. If any listeners out there are in the book publishing industry, please let me know. I've written my version of a self-help book. The difference is two things. One, it's written like a choose your own adventure style. So you don't read it cover to cover. You just flip to the index and it says, if you're feeling this, turn to this page. So if you're feeling like your partner's pulling away, if you're feeling some trouble sleeping, if you're feeling like your emotions won't come out, then you turn to the section on that. Kind of the way therapy works. We switch topics day to day. The other thing that's different about it is that I speak in very non-clinical language and I use silly metaphors like my step into the punch in ways that I think will like stick with you. I don't think people want to hear me talk, but that metaphor, that image will stay in your head and you'll remember the lesson. Anyway, it's not about the book. But the reason I bring up the book is because I wonder if in a karmic universe secret kind of way, maybe I'm not ready for the celebrity that would come with a book deal. I think I want that, and I'm telling people I'm trying to get published. But if I actually was being interviewed on Good Morning America, maybe I'm not ready for that. So maybe there's something I'm kind of holding myself back. And we do this in relationships. People say they're dating, but I can tell when you're like, not really dating. You're going on dates, but I don't know if you're open to actually meeting someone and connecting. So that gets to the question of, like, what are your goals? Realistically, no judgment, just knowing yourself. Is this short term or long term? Are you dating for a fun time or a long time? Are you dating the mate? Or are you like in travel mode? Like, what's the timeline? What's the goal? What's the and that can be why you're getting the ick or ruling people out, because I'm not really trying to get serious. Or maybe trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole because you've decided, like that famous scene in Friends, Monica, no, the other one, Rachel. I think she was turning 30, and she's like, that means if I want to be engaged to a guy for a year, and that means if I want to get married a year after that, and if we want to wait a year before we have kids, and I want to have kids by the time I'm 33, I need to meet the love of my life yesterday. Some people have a timeline, and it's like, all right, just go home with whoever you're dancing with at 2 a.m. And then the other thing that I see factoring in here with this, like, what are your goals, is, do you want somebody who's like move-in ready, or do you want to polish them up? I'm learning Spanish right now, slowly, dia para dia. And I'm learning there's a difference between soy and estoy. Yo soy un hombre, un psicológico. Yo estoy cansado y hambre. So I am always soy. This is a treat. This is meat. But a state is estoy. I am currently tired and hungry, but that might change. So when you're trying to decide if somebody has potential, quote unquote, if I can polish them up, you got to look at the factor, and is this a changeable factor? I can't change my height, but I could change my hair length. I can't change with ease my profession, but I could change how often I cuss. So some things are more behavioral, some things are more physiologic or set point. Some things are, I could change being a psychologist, but that's a whole thing. But I could change which practice I work in. I did that after my daughter was born. I moved to someplace closer to home. So asking somebody to change their career is maybe too big an ask. Asking somebody to take a job closer to home, that's maybe more changeable. So the other thing that's a factor here is when you're trying to look at potential in somebody, somebody might say they're trying to change, or it's in the motion, or I'm planning on, but like, how far along? How much effort have they put in? If somebody's been, quote unquote, trying to quit smoking for 6 years now, I don't know if they're really trying to quit smoking. But if they've been trying to quit for 6 days, okay, like maybe we need to see where this is going. Like they're doing the damn thing. It's early days, but there's potential. If somebody says they're in school for blah blah blah, they're going back to school to get blah blah blah. Well, like, do you have 2 credits left or 3 years left? Like, where are we, do I wait? So this is where we need to talk about what I call the 10% rule of compromise. In any relationship, in any match, you are going to have to sacrifice 10% of who you would be if you were single. And so are they. And we're going to do this exchange. Now, you don't give up the big stuff. The saying I have come up with here is, if I were asking a female partner, would you mind wearing less heels because then you're taller than me? If I asked my female partner, would you mind posting less provocative pictures on the internet? If I asked my female partner, would you mind not saying the such and such word in public? Those are things that, okay, everything I just said could be controlling. That's not the point of the story. The point is, those are things that I could ask. But if I ask them, like that example, I don't want you to have your career. I want you to change careers. I want you to not hang out with that person anymore. Then now I'm asking for too big an ask. And now I'm basically describing somebody who's not you. So if I have my short Italian wife, she can never be a tall black woman from Paris. So if I start describing things that sounds like that, then I don't want her. And she'll never be a tall black woman from Paris. Now it's more than 10% compromise. But if she asked me to cut my hair and I asked her to try to work from home more, maybe that's 10%. If I'm single, I can grow my hair all I want. And if she's single, she can work in the office till 10. But we need to accommodate to one another, 10%, within that behavioral estoy kind of way. Okay? That doesn't mean your partner's controlling. That doesn't mean that I'm having to change who I am for this relationship, because of course you're going to have to. You can't walk around the house in your underwear as much because now they might have guests over into our house. You don't live alone. You can't put the TV at full blast because they're on a work call in the other room. If you live alone, you can do whatever the hell you want. But then you're alone. So if you want to be with somebody, you're going to have to make a sacrifice. 10%, not more, and not the big stuff. This is where I see ego and power sometimes come in of, I want them to change, but would you be willing to change? We need to do a little give-get here. You're not a peach either. You're not a unicorn either. So sometimes there's a finger point of they need to blah, 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 then they'll be my ideal partner. They're allowed to ask something of you too in this tit for tat negotiation. And it's a negotiation. Once we get to a certain threshold of a relationship where we've checked off, we're attracted physically, we have emotional intimacy, it seems like our lifestyles overlap, there's just this one little thing. Okay, you've gone through the interview process. You have the necessary degree. The company's offering the necessary payment package. We're just down to this one little last part so we can sign the contract. And each of you is going to have to sacrifice a little something, and now the deal is signed. Relationships are about compromise, guys. It's not about ideal or perfect. It's about good enough, or best within reality, or best within your limits, or best within the timeline you're looking for. I've had people sit on this couch. We're in my office. The couch is right there. I've had people sit on my couch and say, well, I don't know about this person. What if my ideal partner is out there and he's just in Australia? And I'm like, well, then he's in friggin' Australia. So unless you're going to move to Australia, he's going to move here, then what's the point? This is not your ideal partner because he's in Australia, or he's married, or he's like, or she, whatever. Like, if you're holding out for some made up thing, and this is a whole other thing that's not worth me getting into a rant on here, but we've become too global. Like, just because you can see a person with certain traits through your phone, they are famous, so you can't get them. They're married, so you can't have them. They live in another country, so they're not unavailable. They're out of your range. They're like, they exist, yes, but they're not yours. So this is not, people would never say this in their vows, but I really think that when you get married, you should look at your partner and say, I take you to love and to hold because you are good enough. And that doesn't sound romantic, does it? You want to tell the person they're perfect, but they're not perfect, and neither are you. But you're both good enough for each other. And really, my definition of love is that we each show our partner all your foibles, all your good stuff, but all your warts and all your baggage. And you look at their baggage and they look at yours, and you both shrug your shoulders and go, okay, I could do with that. Because I hope that you're kind to my baggage as I am to yours. We both need to be considerate. You're not perfect, and neither am I. So we're looking for good enough within your criteria. But we don't want to take a bad deal out of desperation. It's a balancing act. Don't take a bad deal out of desperation and just, that's all I can get. But don't pass up a good enough deal that has potential because you're holding out for perfect. So compromise, guys. Now, last section. Dating tips, talking about, let's say, the apps. Guys, I've looked at all the apps and I've seen pros and cons. I've had people pay for Raya and the League, and it doesn't turn into anything. I've had people say that they found their partner on Tinder, even though it's supposed to be just a hookup app. I've had people try Match.com and fill out all the forms and bupkis. So I can't point to any specific one. I really can't. What I think is more critical, though, is that it's how you show up on the app. Who's your target audience, number one? Get feedback on your presentation. That's just something I offer. We look at your profile, and I want to tell you how people might perceive that from the outside. You want to fish with the right bait, which is partly your profile, but also kind of your activity on the app. You want to know how the apps work. I have this one woman, I finally got her on Bumble, and she's shocked at some of the guys that are interested in her. And I'm like, yeah, because some guys will just swipe on everything and play a numbers game. You got to factor that in. So the apps that I think work best are the ones where you're doing an activity in vivo, in real life with people. I like The Base, which is in Miami and certain other cities, but not everywhere, or meetup.com. And what I like about both of these is that you already have an icebreaker. You're there at this function for the base meeting or the meetup. So there's a reason to talk to people and they have name tags. Number two, you pick an activity you would enjoy. I went and did an event with the base where we were taking iPhone photography lessons at a tropical garden. So if you don't like the outside, or you don't care about photography, or you don't know much about technology, you're not there. So already we have one thing in common. We have an interest in photography. Show me some of your pictures. Do you always use the iPhone or do you have a different camera? We have something to start with, some overlap of lifestyle or interest or hobbies. And then number three, you can vibe right there. I went to one base dinner and one of the people at the dinner was immediately unpleasant and undesirable and just grumpy. And I don't know if I would have caught that if I was talking to him through an app because you can't hear tone or context. But I saw him interrupt other people. I saw him demean other people. He kept looking at his watch. And I'm like, man, that's such useful data. But I was not on a solo networking lunch just with him. There were 8 other people at the table. So there's less pressure. So meetup or base, I get no kickback from that. That is just my push. And then the other thing with the apps or any dating is I want you to over talk it and check for chemistry early. So really move off the app into an in-person meeting, low stakes, coffee or a cocktail or a walk in the park within a week. People get bored. People are having other conversations and texting other people. It gets tedious asking these questions when I don't really know you. It feels like an interview and both. It feels forced. So jump right to chemistry. Obviously, be safe. Obviously, decide if you want to make that investment, but it can really give you a sense of the person. Now, which protocol do you want to consider when dating through the apps or otherwise? Are you gonna fake it and kind of catfish? Are you going to put your best foot forward? Are you going to scare them off by being directly blunt? There is no one right way, but know what you're doing. I like to fish with dynamite. I like to come right in and tell a dirty joke right away or say something self-demeaning right away and get a sense of how you react to that. I don't want to fake it too long, but at first I'm more charming and eventually I'll kind of relax. I don't want to come in too hard. So, and I'm talking about networking. I'm not dating, which is different. The other thing I see, and I think women do this more, are you going to be attractive and like let them see the full package of like, oh my God, I'm the best. Like, check me out. I bring all this to the table. Or are you going to give a challenge? It'd be a little difficult to see like, are they up to the challenge? Are they willing to put an effort or they just want something that's easy? I would rather you be very desirable and attractive in the beginning. But then as we're starting to get more serious, yeah, maybe let him make some plans. Maybe cancel a date and see how he handles it. Maybe put a little bit more boundaries or demands to see if it's just easy. But if you come in so objectionable right away, I think that's too much too fast. My 2 cents. And then in dating, listen, you're not dating one person monogamous right out of the gate, though some people have sat here and been under that impression. We're all dating around, but you got to balance quality versus quantity. If you're dating too many people, then you forget who's who and you're not giving yourself a chance to have any kind of feelings. But if you go all in on one person, well, then you might waste a lot of time because what if you get to a red flag 3 months in and you're like, damn it, I wish I'd been dating a couple other backup options. So balance, quality versus quantity. As I said, timing matters here. Are you really ready and open? Or are you just trying to get under to get over? I'm not opposed to a hookup, but like be real with what you're doing. And that's a factor. And that's also karmic. Like let the other person be a little aware. Know your insecurities and fears and projections, as I had said previously, but some people really scare somebody off in the first interaction because they'll talk about their ex. Like that's a no-no. Don't talk about your previous relationship on the first date. But you're already trying to like jump to that. Like, so have you cheated on exes? Dude, like obviously you want to know that about a partner, but you can't come in that hot. That's you leading with fear. And it's gross. It's not going to go well. So long term, to make this work though, more than just the meeting, you want to be careful that you don't lose you to be part of 2. There needs to be self-love and self-worth. There needs to be a maintaining of your identity. if you just morph to fit whoever they are, then you're kind of catfishing them and yourself, and it's not sustainable. And then you're not really feeling that love because you're putting on an act. You need to have boundaries and continue certain habits. I think it's very healthy to tell somebody, even on a first date, if they're like, the only night I can get together is Thursday. Sorry, Thursday night I do blah 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 with my friends. It's a standing thing. I guess we'll meet next week. But like, hold the line on certain things so that way you stick to, like, you're presenting your lifestyle fairly, but also I don't want to resent this person that I made all these sacrifices and they didn't turn out to be the one. And like I said, with things like Meetup, like, I want you to meet somebody doing what you do, living the lifestyle you live, like no catfishing and no forcing it. There was an app that it didn't really take off because I think it was too creepy, called Happen, Hapn. And the premise was, without giving away too much information, it would look at your geo data on your phone, like where you have been frequently, and theirs, and match it up. And basically, if you both go to the same hair salon and the same religious services and the same yoga studio and the same grocery, your lives are already so in sync. So it's more likely that this is going to work out. If one of you lives a county away, if one of you goes to religious services and the other one never does, if one of you works from home and the other one works downtown, like, you're not likely to bump into each other naturally. And so your lives just may not align. So I encourage people to kind of keep being you along the way. There's obviously more we can discuss, but this is my buckshot approach. Lots of tips and tricks, lots of thoughts on why we fall into certain patterns, why we seek out certain mates, why you might not be finding your mate yet. So take all this, digest it. Like I said, if you have questions, hit me up on social media, send me an email through my website, or schedule an appointment and we can talk about your specific situation. But this is Dr. G and my psychology of dating overview, and I hope this was informative. Be well, guys. Until next time, out there in listener land.